All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I just want to make a couple points that this is actually a pretty interactive discussion that we're going to be having. And so I would encourage you to participate, ask us questions, give us feedback, but we also are going to be using a QR code. So in a couple minutes, I'll show that so you can scan the QR code and you're able to see the case that we're going to discuss, because I think the case really helps to anchor a lot of the discussion that we're going to have. So with that, we are going to be having a discussion around dismantling the over-policing of Black residents. And we'll give some backdrop as to how we came to this topic and how we decided to write an article on this topic. But first, we'll do some brief introductions. So I'll start with you, Adira, and then we'll work our way down the table.
Hi, everyone. My name is Adira Landry. I'm an emergency medicine physician at the Brigham. I am a former APD fellowship director, and now I am an advisor at the medical school, at the Harvard Medical School, for the medical students. In my job, I love to help develop early career professionals, help them navigate the workspace.
Awesome.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. My name is Joshua Ellis. I'm currently a faculty physician at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center in the emergency department. I serve as the assistant clerkship director and the director of our diversity recruitment for our residency. Kind of a role in that role, I don't want to do graduate level education, particularly residents, and so we had an agreement that I would function with medical student admissions process all the way up into the entry gates of residency. So a lot of my director of diversity recruitment is kind of taking on that responsibility. And otherwise, I'm about to move to Arkansas. I just got engaged, and I'm going to go work for the University of Arkansas, where I'll be the clerkship director there, and so exciting.
Congratulations.
Hello, everyone. My name is Anyako Tugo. I am faculty at Brigham and Women's Hospital. I work along with Adira. I also have a background in health policy, and then I also have a nonprofit that supports Black women physicians in leadership roles.
I'll use this one. And Alden Landry, emergency medicine physician at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, assistant dean for diversity, inclusion, and community partnership at Harvard Medical School. And along with Adira, I serve as one of the Castle Society advisors, which at the undergrad Harvard Medical School, we educate and advise and support medical students. And it's been a role I've been in for 7 or 8 years, and I really enjoy. And I think part of what you hear is we all have roles where we've been working with trainees, working with students, working with junior faculty as they've moved up or moved along in the academic conveyor belt. And so we've all had experiences where we've seen the struggles of trainees, in particular minoritized trainees, and the struggles that they've had as they've participated in residency programs, some of which has been daunting and many times punitive. And we wanted to really get to the heart as to why those punitive actions tend to happen. So I'm going to turn to you, Josh, for our first question. So we wrote this article, and you can tell a little bit about the article, but what was the impetus for our initial discussion and why we wrote this article?
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. Well, first and foremost, we had this team already developed for a previous Perspectives article that got published in the New England Journal of Medicine called Interviewed While Black. It discussed interview etiquette for increasing not just recruitment capability of your residency, but also the experience for the applicants, and particularly minority and Black applicants. I had my own experience. I did residency at Mayo Clinic after going to Howard Medical School, HU. And while I felt like I was a really well-received, well-loved resident, I had a particular experience being the only Black resident there. And now that I'm in a faculty position at Beth Israel, I also had an experience mentoring Black residents. And even some of these residents may be on probation, they may be well-received, excellent residents. I suddenly start to realize we all had the same stories, and I could identify exactly what they were describing to me. Regardless of how good they were, how tough they were, it's the same kind of description. And then finally, Chanel Wilson, as a Black urologist, she wrote an article for Stat News, and I thought it was great. I think it's called Gaslighting New Trainees, and it describes a spiraling experience of this hyper-visible situation where you're the only Black resident, and then this, you're constantly nervous, constantly looking over your shoulder. And she's an excellently well-received resident who ends up being an academician, a urologist, and so her story was also something relatable, and she also shed light on a statistic that 20% of Black residents, or 20% of residents who are dismissed from programs are African American, despite the fact that they only make up 5% of our resident body. And I think that really got me going about ways in which we can dismantle this idea of over-policing or hyper-visibility, hyper-scrutinizing, and hopefully improve upon that impact. I brought the team on board, and the article is very much different than the original idea, and it's grown and developed, and everyone added their own little expertise and niche to it.
And so I want to go to you next, Adira. Josh mentioned the data, and you all can see the data here on the slides about the dismissal rates. Can you tell us a little bit more about the underpinnings of this data and how that equates to the experiences of a trainee and what they mean, how they can be singled out? They may be the first, the only, or the lonely in a residency program, yet easily be singled out and be put on academic probation or even dismissed from a residency program.
I think, through social media, a lot of people have reached out to me for mentorship when they're at smaller programs where they are the only person of color or the only Black resident, I should say, and they're seeking guidance because of some status that they have been placed on, whether it be probation, formally, or remediation, informally. But they are really traumatized by the fact that many of these encounters that they have had that have led them to this status change were based on a professional interaction that has really labeled them as being unprofessional. And hardly ever is anyone reaching out to me because of, I'm not doing well clinically. They're saying that I'm harming patients or that I'm not passing my exams. A lot of it surrounds just the interactions that they're having in the workplace. And I think that's probably one of the hardest parts because it's so subjective. Everyone has a different opinion about, an event and perhaps a series of events. And it's really, really challenging for a resident who might be the only person there, or maybe there's one faculty or who feels like, I don't really know how to advocate for myself because, someone was saying something to me, I feel like I responded appropriately, and now I'm like marked, I'm labeled, and they feel targeted. And I wish this were just like a single encounter. But unfortunately, so many people have reached out to me with this experience. I have witnessed it too through my various roles. I have witnessed it with medical students as well as residents, where a small interaction or a small behavior can label them as difficult or challenging, and then now everything else becomes amplified because they're under this microscope. So even if they were a little bit struggling with the academics, now it seems amplified and made larger. And I think that just becomes this like vacuum that just sucks them in, and it's really hard for them to get out.
Onyeka, I want to turn to you for the next question, and I want to tap in our other panelists as well, but a lot of this, and Adira alluded to this, this term professionalism, right? We anchor on it in medicine, and you often hear it as an evaluation. We discuss a resident's professionalism as part of their evaluation, but it's really subjective. So can you talk just a little bit more about what is professionalism and how it can be weaponized to a degree?
Yeah, so professionalism is often used to describe how people present in the workplace, like what societal norms that they have in that space and whether or not you can basically acclimate to that. Unfortunately, that's all often based in whiteness, so the way that you dress, the way that you wear your hair, and a lot of these are like adherent to like whether or not there's just so many different cultural barriers to that, and just differences. Like for me, the way I'm wearing my hair, some people may see that as unprofessional. So it's like, what is professionalism and who is allowed to be professional? And oftentimes Black students, Black trainees, other trainees of color, just for the fact that they exist, they don't fit in those spaces. So it's just another way of policing individuals in that realm. So.
Josh, Adira.
I think it becomes a challenge when it's defined by those in charge, and those in charge have different value systems than those who are being led. And the description of how we speak, how we dress, how we behave on shift or in a meeting or even online, it is defined by someone, you know, who might be in charge, and they might have a different value set. They might be of a different generation. They might have a different background. And so trying to match those, especially across different generations, can be quite challenging, because what we might see as appropriate behavior online, or even the way we dress, could be completely contradictory to what our leaders say is appropriate. And I think that is where the real conflict arises, is that we are all different, and we all see the workplace differently. We all enter the workplace differently, and yet we're being measured against a single standard of what is appropriate.
So I want to go a little off script here, because one of the things that you just mentioned, Adira, is the power dynamics and those doing the evaluations. And it's oftentimes not just the physicians. And there's interactions with nurses, there's interactions with other staffs and departments. And so can you all just talk about the fact that there are often power dynamics that trainees are going to experience, and you know, as we are thinking about how we are assessing a trainee in their professionalism, how it may be beyond even the interactions with the other physicians in the group, but maybe the nurses or other staff within the department.
I can begin with that. I think it's a big question, but I did think of this when you were talking. It's not always just your program director and you walked in and looked unprofessional to them. Getting along with nurses in and of itself is seen as a professional task, and it's much more difficult for other of our colleagues and certain demographics to get along with them. And not only get along with them, enjoy getting along with them while practicing good clinical medicine and waking up at 2 a.m. to run a code, and then also doing all this and being a woman in the workplace and making sure your doctors respect you. And so a lot of this comes from the workplace and all these nuanced ways in which it can creep in, and then it reaches your desk of your program director, and you're getting a lot of these messages and not filtering them or necessarily navigating them in a most beneficial way to that resident. And so I might have just overly explained it, but that's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, and just something else to add on to that is that people often forget intersecting identities. Like, it's one thing to present in the space as a white man versus a white woman versus presenting in the space as a black man versus a black woman. And those different interactions, especially with nursing staffs, can be perceived very differently. And that kind of also impacts like how they might be successful or unsuccessful in a certain space.
I think one trend that I've seen through my advising is a resident might be labeled by one nurse and because of an interaction, and then it like spreads like wildfire through the community, and now there's this like stain on the reputation. And I have just learned that it is really, really, really hard to build a great reputation, because it requires like multiple positive experiences and people really trusting you and relying on you. And it is very easy to ruin that. Like, it doesn't take much to ruin a reputation. And when I'm, advising students and residents, because they come to me like often and say, it seems like no one trusts me. I'm in trouble. No one gets along with me. I mean, it's really hard to rework that scenario, because they have to have multiple examples of like, now you're trustworthy. But still, I think that stain is in the background on their reputation. And I think with the nurses, it is a distinct trend, because I have found that in these scenarios, like, it just takes one, and then it can ruin the reputation amongst the whole community.
And not to overdo this part, but some of the things we were discussing, and like, it is a vulnerability of the infrastructure of the system. Like, these are residents going month to month in a different setting. Secondly, now you're talking about even if you take away potential racism, all this that is specific to that individual, they're easy to describe. I can go into Mayo Clinic and tell somebody the black guy with the ponytail, and every nursing floor, everyone can see me walk in the door and they already have a story about me. And so that vulnerability is certainly there. And particularly, and we keep picking at nurses because it's a big departmental thing, but even physicians in a much more higher circumstance of vulnerability and power infrastructure. If I tell another attending about an individual that they haven't met yet, and they can describe that individual, clock them in, never have to worry about learning that description and that person walks in the room. That's the type of vulnerability we're describing.
Yeah, and I think the term we often use is hypervisibility in these situations for our minoritized trainees. So I want to turn to you again, Josh, because part of what we did in this paper was put together a framework. So for you, this is the time that you all can use the QR code. There's two parts to this QR code. One is the framework, because I'm assuming that you all can't see this super small print, nor can I. Secondly, the case that we're going to be discussing, as well as some other resources, are going to be available in this link. Please tell me it's working. If not, we'll figure it out. That being said, Josh, we put together a framework as part of this article. Just walk us very briefly as to what was the purpose of this framework and how it could be used.
The original goal, and I still think the goal, is that a program director and a student wanting the same thing for each other, i.e., I think you need some help advancing your career, or here's the improvements I think you need, I've gotten complaints. Somehow this is an intervention, and thinking that you and the resident can sit down at this table and share this framework to help you. And some of the principles I think every program director, every program leadership, everyone in residency and education would respect and understand. And sometimes it does get lost in the system. It's something the resident can easily complain about and have power to do it. But at the same time, if a residency program director feels you need help, I think it's an obligation, especially a minority person, to intervene and provide the help. So some things you do with that help is provide privacy. We talked about that. If you're on a lesson plan or an intervention, not every doctor needs to know about it. Transparency, they should know where they stand with you. They should know where that feedback came from, the objectivity of that feedback, the subjectivity of it. They should know where they stand in their residency rankings, and so forth and so on. Another big principle I put in this framework that I'm really proud of and we really hone in on is a non-punitive style of education and a shared decision-making with your education. I think if we start to talk to our residents and have them buy into it, we can correct them, provide feedback, evaluations, even shape if you think their professionalism off without destroying their residency experience and tormenting them and making everything worse by having this spiraling effect. And so that's where it went, and you guys can see there's many parts of it, but it's grown from there. And
I think what I want to echo is the value of psychological safety, because throughout all of these all of these segments within the framework, we're just talking about making someone feel safe. Because yes, of course, Black residents, like any other resident, there might be some knowledge gaps or skill gaps, even issues with communication and interacting with other professionals that could benefit from coaching. Like, we wouldn't want to say that everything that we're doing is perfect and we don't require remediation or training or coaching. That's not what we're saying. But it's the way the message is delivered. It's the lack of voice, the lack of agency, that void of psychological safety that can make this a very traumatic experience, especially if you are alone.
So I want to start with you, Anyeke, and we'll just work our way down the line. I think we all resonate well with different aspects of this framework. And so if you could just tell me what part resonates with you most, both as someone who's been on the trainee side and then someone who advises and supports, especially women of color, in the work that you do.
Yeah, I think transparency is key. I feel like oftentimes when they're doing remediation plans like this, they often offer very different ones for different people, even if there's the same remediation issue. And I think also because there's always that kind of time where things are always changing, where someone might say like, hey, we didn't discuss this, and they're kind of changing like the goal marker, the end point for them. So just having transparency in terms of what expectations are needed, and just making sure that that is consistent with each trainee that you offer that to.
Josh?
I think the punitive style of education has to go away entirely. Obviously there's patient clinical safety and you can be stressed and in that situation provide that type of feedback, but if it doesn't have to do with direct immediate patient safety, my job was to educate you, and your lack of knowledge or lack of ability to work clinically in this environment right now is a reflective of my education. And I promised you I was going to teach you, I promised you I was going to train you, and therefore if you're coming here needing training, I can't provide what might seem like punitive. Even if coming into work outside of your regular hours to do more work, there's no way they're not going to receive that as punitive. And so understanding that model and making them aware of it, I think that's my most passionate part.
I agree with both of those. I would say objective measurements as far as why a remediation plan or the feedback needs to be given. I think I have seen and even personally received feedback that felt very vague, unmeasurable, just lacked the specificity for me to really understand what the problem was. So I think coming to honestly, any person, but especially someone who feels very vulnerable, with objective measures, objective feedback, something that's measurable and traceable, is very important. And alongside that, it's really important to check in with the person and get their side of the story as well. So just giving someone voice and saying, I've noticed that you've been late to shifts 4 or 5 times, and then follow that with, is there anything going on? Am I missing something? Is there a issue with home or access to transportation or sleep? Like, what's going on? Just giving them that time to check in and process and share. That gives them a lot of voice, and we're really trying to remove the trauma of helping someone grow and learn, and making them feel like they have a say or perspective is one step to do that.
So for me, one of the parts that really resonated with me as we were putting this together is the importance not only of objectives, but making sure that there are milestones that are easily identifiable, and also an understanding that there has to be an endpoint to any sort of remediation plan or any sort of effort to improve or help that trainee improve. We want to make sure that the experience in residency is not a toxic experience for the entire 3 or 4 years, particularly in emergency medicine. And oftentimes, many of these professionalism issues are subjective, and so it's hard to have an endpoint as to when they can come off of monitored status or probation or whatever it may be. And so how do you make sure that there is a clear milestone that a trainee needs to meet, and then also an endpoint to their assessment so they can move on and have that weight off their shoulder removed so they can have the rest of their, hopefully have a positive experience for the rest of their residency? Did you want to say something else, Josh? I saw you reaching for the mic.
No.
All right.
I was getting gassed up.
Okay.
I wanted to add on or echo what Adira was saying about just asking questions. I think people just often make assumptions, especially when it comes to trainees, that they might not be the friendliest person, or they just make up crazy scenarios in their head when they might actually be going through a lot. So just taking the time to ask someone a question like, hey, how are you doing? What's going on? I've noticed that there's been this change, can make a really profound difference in a trainee's experience.
So this is the part where we're going to move to the case discussion, and hopefully you all were able to access the QR code. So we are going to give you a couple minutes to review the case, and then maybe if you're sitting next to someone, just talk over, get your thoughts about what the experience was, and we'll come back in maybe, 10 minutes, just in the interest of time, and sort of have a group debrief about this case. So partner up with somebody, since we're in a small group, discuss the case after you've read it, and then we'll come back in 10 minutes.
That is the definition of it. When you describe that, I said, he's a trust fund baby. In my head, I said, what I said.
All right, we're going to bring everybody back together for discussion. So what were your thoughts, knee-jerk reactions when you read this case? How did you feel? And then we'll get to these two questions of where did they fail and what interventions would you recommend. But knee-jerk reaction, how did you feel about reading a case like this? Is this something familiar? Is this something that you've seen or witnessed at your institution or you know of? Did this resonate with you? Okay. Okay. Sure. I just want to make sure we can allow some other folks to talk, but I do want to settle in on a comment that you made, which I think is really important, is our trainees are here to learn to be doctors, and we need to make sure that we are providing a safe environment for them to become better physicians so they can go on and take care of patients. And when you add on the added stress of trying to be in these situations where you're advocating for yourself, when you're speaking to HR, when you're doing the anonymous reporting, that is a tax on you. That takes away from your time and your opportunity to learn. Other thoughts?
I think one of the challenge here is that, especially the last 5 years when we tried to really increase recruitment for underrepresented medicine, what we often fail to understand is the landing part of that. Like once we recruit them, do we have the right resources to mentor, support, acknowledging that we all will, like I fail a lot, like I fall a lot, and I also have people that now help me navigate that, but like navigating that earlier on, especially for those who are, I love the word like that hypervisibility, because like that one mistake gets amplified a lot more in the context of you are the only person in that space, and people didn't know how to not like understand, is this like a flaw in this person that they need to grow better, or is this like a thing that like, did we change the way that we recruit? So all those like languages, like don't, like that needs to be addressed earlier. I think so where they fail here is that oftentimes I think we tend to move to a place because of this one person, not knowing that we have no control over their promotion. They might leave, they might get sick, they might, something happens to them, and then the one person that we recruited becomes now alone, and then not knowing how do you then navigate this. Like now what do I do when these are common things? And so in some ways I think that we have to be a little bit more intentional about those efforts. And so for me in our shop, when we hire somebody, I get to meet with them ahead of time, so I can tell them all the dirt and all the things that are happening in the department, because I want them to truly make that decision. Like this is actually not, like this is a non-starter. Like, thank you for telling me that. Some of them have not continued to work with us, and some of them like come to us knowing all the challenges that they will be facing, and being a lot more intentional. So when you come here, like who will be the people that you're going to be talking to when you do encounter being singled out, when you make that first like tough case that end up in the quality review, like those are things that we just all physicians will experience. But maybe when you are that one person, the first time you get it, you're like, is this just me, or is this like?
So thank you for that feedback and your comments. At some point, I'll turn to my colleagues because I do want to have this discussion a little bit more about our recruitment efforts. And it's great, we put out these great efforts to come and do visiting clerkships with us. We'll pay for your travel. We'll put you in a place where you feel like this is a great opportunity for you. But then you only get that snapshot of a month and you don't realize that this is a 3 or 4 year engagement with a residency program and your program directors. And then you get there and it's that hyper visibility because you're the first or the only or you're lonely. And then you don't have the support that goes along to make it go from recruitment to feeling like you are included as a part of residency and you feel like you belong in the residency. So we'll come back to that one, but I do want to bring that back to my panelists. Other comments from others? And we can move to the first question, where did they fail? And I think there's multiple points along the way. So if you felt one particular place where they failed, maybe give us a little bit up to the why. Okay. That's rare for you.
Did she have a plan when she saw that the
Thank you. Saw your hand. Sure. Yeah, I agree. And I think, for the students in the room, and then, also as we are in these roles, and, Josh mentioned that he's going to be moving on to Arkansas. I mean, there's a void that is left when one person leaves an institution because the minority tax that goes along with being the Black or the Latinx or the other minoritized trainee faculty member, where you are oftentimes an unpaid, unsupported support network for all of your diverse trainees. And so how do you make sure that those voids don't occur? And how do you make sure that it's not just built upon one single person? That is not a safe foundation. One person is not how you establish a system of support for your trainees, especially your minoritized trainees.
I'll just add as well, I think that we're making assumptions perhaps that PE left in good faith, right? It actually doesn't end in residency or in training. It happens also to faculty members.
Sure.
I've seen deans of admissions being kicked out or asked to leave their post for being unprofessional, when in fact it's just used against them to let them leave that post. And so in those situations, even though you have great intentions of modeling and being a good mentor for those people behind you, you may not actually have that chance or choice to figure out the next Lego pieces because you asked them to leave.
Sure. And I hear some Dara, are you ready to jump in? I think you're, okay.
Finish your thought and I'll-
No. I was going to start to turn to you because I really wanted to, bring to the fact that, this is a case that is not an emergency medicine, but I think we can all recognize that you change out one name, you change out one program, you change out the residency, you can see this potentially happening at your institution or an institution that you had a relationship with. So I don't want us to sort of say that this is a problem for those people over there. I think this is an us problem. And I think part of the reason why 4 emergency physicians wrote about this is because we saw parts of this case in ourselves and parts of the case in our experiences that we've had as we've been working with trainees along the way. And I do want to go back to a comment that you made about, this starts back at kindergarten and at early points. And we made this comment in one of our presentations when we brought this to the group on diversity and inclusion with the AAMC about how Black boys go from being seen as cute, innocent, smart in kindergarten, and by the time they're in 3rd grade, they're considered threats. They're considered, unruly and violent and unsafe. And these are 3rd graders. And so when you have people who are just seen differently at an early age in the classroom, and all the bias that comes along with it, whether you want to call it the hard R with racism, or whether you want to just be lofty with it and say it's unconscious bias, this is a part of our education system, and I think there are flaws within our education system that lead to minoritized individuals oftentimes being penalized even for the smallest infractions. So I want to turn this over to the panelists because we're nearing our time and I want to start to wrap this up.
One thing that stood out most from this, and also what you guys are telling me, first of all, thank you for being here. You're a 4th-year medical student, you're an intern, you guys are at a conference doing research at a major academic conference. I'm so proud of you. If you guys take anything from this, the saddest part about the story, she went home and she internalized this thing, and she's having panic attacks, doubting her worth. And if you compare her to that Instagram picture of her on match day when she was the greatest version of herself, had her husband saying she's 10 times better than me as a person, to where she's at waking up early in the morning, not able to think she's good enough to do the job that they promised they recruited her to this, right? And so I really want to shed light on, I don't care if you're not getting your case reports done on time. If this is what's happening to you, then the infrastructure has failed. And so there's much higher stakes here than just the macrocosm of the residency. These are individuals And hopefully you guys succeed. And let us know if you guys need any help. You have an army. We promise we'll ride. And so.
Yeah.
I just want to comment on the power of gaslighting, because I think, this article that we are referencing, it talks about how damaging it can be. And so the importance of just being believed, or at the very least heard, and allowing someone to have a voice to say, this is what's happening to me. I'm not crazy. I survived medical school, I survived residency, and now I'm a fellow and this is happening. And I know it's not me because I've done well in many other situations in life. But for some reason in this environment, it's just toxic to me. And then having that heard is very powerful. I think when folks are expressing their concerns about how they're being treated, about how they're being respected, and it gets minimized, they're told, well, you just need to be better, you just need to work harder, you just need to do whatever it is. It really feels like I'm the problem when you know that, yes, I have a growth mindset, but this is not my problem. Like, this is happening to me.
Anyaka, anything?
Yeah, I think this kind of goes back to what I think LA mentioned, this is when you don't have the infrastructure to support these individuals. We often get so excited when someone says they're the first Black neurosurgeon at X, or they're the first Latinx person at X. But what else is there to support them when these people actually come into these institutions? And oftentimes it's very difficult for them because they are the only one, and the system there is not designed to support these individuals. So what can we do to support them? And it's also residency. Like, you're so stressed that you don't have time to adequately think, like, who's in my corner and who's all that. Like, it just takes so much time away from, like, seeing patients and doing notes and all, studying for board exams and stuff, that you oftentimes don't have that time to process who's your advocate or your ally. So I feel like more onus should be placed on a lot of these institutions when they take people knowing that they might be the only one at that institution.
And I just want to end on the fact that oftentimes we are isolated in our institutions, and you have to look for your team, your allies outside of your department, and whether that's someone in faculty or the DIO of your institution, or it is another faculty in another department, or even tapping into resources like the Academy for Diversity, Inclusion, and Emergency Medicine here at SAEM. You have to find your team and your network that's going to help you and support you and think about how you navigate these tough situations. We are all available. Part of the QR code at the very bottom actually has our contact information, and so we're always available to help out trainees. I think we've all had experiences where we've worked with students halfway across the country. Often I've worked with students not even in my specialty, and we've made sure that we put an emphasis as a part of our careers to supporting individuals as they go through this process of being a trainee and being junior faculty. So any final remarks from our audience, from our panelists before we just wrap it up with questions?
So for those who are the three who spoke up, or the two who spoke up earlier, I would say definitely find a team of people you trust. That team might not be within your residency or within your department, but they exist. My career totally changed once I started to understand the power of building a network or a personal board of directors, my go-to people who I could really trust. So I think they're out there. It's just a matter of finding them and nurturing that relationship.
Anything else? All right. Oh, go ahead, Onyeka. I'm sorry. I was going to just say thank you to our audience.
Oh, thank you to our audience. Works as well. But I think if you ever find yourself in a situation like this, whether you're in residency or you become a faculty, and you feel like stuff like this is starting to also affect your patient care, such as nurses not following your orders or instructions, document it and report it, because that's the easiest way for them to remove you from a program. It's also the easiest way for you to protect yourself. And the first person who ever has the story is allowed to define the narrative, unfortunately. So I'm an advocate for kind of protecting yourself from that regards. But thank you guys so much for coming.
Yeah, thank you all for attending, and we're here for questions, but I'll go ahead and end the slideshow, and you all can come up to us and talk, or if you have questions from your seat, feel free to ask us. But thank you for being here, especially on Friday at noon on the last day of the conference.